Here's what Thomas J. Ord, the author of Open and Relational Theology, had to say about my upcoming book, The Edge of the Inside, releasing March 31st. Quote, I love Jeremy Jernigan's writing style, but I love his questions, reflections, and proposals even more. Many readers will relate to what Jeremy explores, and many will find his insights helpful. I do. Get this book to take an adventure in living and thinking well. End quote. If you'd like to read a copy before it comes out, we'd love to have you join our book launch team. You can find out more at edgeoftheinside.com or at the link in the show notes. Welcome to another episode of Cabernet and Pray, where we sip the wine and we stir the faith. And today is such a cool episode. We are talking about someone who has thoroughly researched what the Bible says about alcohol in ways that you never even thought of. And so if you're like, yeah, I think it says this, or I'm not sure, we've got the guy that spent 13 years working on the book for it. His name is John Anthony Dunne. He earned his PhD in New Testament at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland under the supervision of a guy named Professor N.T. Wright, which you have probably heard about if you've read Christian books. He's the Associate Professor of New Testament at Bethel Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota, where he has taught since 2017. He is the author or editor of 11 books, including his most recent, The Mountains Shall Drip Sweet Wine, a biblical theology of alcohol. John hosts an annual international bottle share reception, say this 10 times fast, at the annual Biblical Studies and Religion conferences every year. And so he has the Society for Beer Lovers and Assorted Academic Research. This is a guy that is hard to put into a box. He's an academic who loves a great beverage and is going to explain to you why you should too. This is episode 66, The Mountains Shall Drip Sweet Wine.
I've never shared this with anybody publicly.
If this was SportsCenter, that would be like such a hot take. Skip Bayless would have no idea. Stephen A. Smith would have no idea what to say if you drop that down. That is so good.
The joke I always say is like, how'd you learn so much? You got to drink a lot.
The power of food and beverage to lubricate an environment.
Resistance to change is hurting the church.
I'm not in the camp that God has a penis or a vagina or a body at all. I'm in the camp that God is a universal spirit.
This is the strangest podcast that I have been on. I don't even know what to do.
I'm kind of geeked up about this wine.
So this is my second glass, and it delivers a little more of a punch than I expected. So if I get a little loopy, it's your fault. You told me to drink on this show.
I will also say as a confession, I am a lightweight. So I've had like 3 sips of this wine and I'm already feeling it. So this is fun.
You've uncovered the mystery. You've exposed the formula.
You've just duct taped together a number of things that aren't normally hanging out together, and I'm here for it.
We're going to sit down at a table, we're going to have a glass of wine and some food, and we're going to talk about the beauty of Jesus.
Thanks for what you're doing with this podcast and for the creative way you're doing it and the beautiful, positive spirit in which you're doing it.
I really appreciate this venue, what you're doing. It is fun, and yet you dig into the deep stuff.
I've heard about your podcast for a long time, and I love that you're a pastor and that you explore the world of faith through wine. That's very unique.
I never thought of church history in terms of wine drinkers. I love this question. Really got my mind rolling.
You had me with herbaceous notes, I want you to know. I'm ready to just stay here and live in the wine tour.
I will never forget the first time I bought a bottle of wine by myself, which was yesterday.
If you're familiar with drunk history, I thought it's like drunk theology. So I
got a little spicy there. It's the peach wine.
Apparently the wine is, here we are. Queer we are. Beer we are. No, it's wine, Jeremy.
By the way, drinking this Pinot Grigio at 3 o'clock in the afternoon is making me even more direct in my communication than I normally would be.
I know why you have your guests drink wine. It makes sense now. Yeah, I get it. A little bit of liquid courage to really unleash the beast.
I think you've got a good podcast. So throw in the wine bit in there. That's nice, doesn't it? Cabernet and Pray, yeah.
Well, believe it or not, you can grow up as a fundamentalist Baptist and then later write a book all about alcohol. Welcome to the podcast, John.
Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, we are excited to have you. I mean, this is one of those no-brainer fits for this whole podcast. I mean, we've got a guy that literally, if you ever I wonder what the Bible says about alcohol. Friends, we've got the guy today. I mean, this is the guy, the book. More than you ever knew you wanted to know about what the Bible says about alcohol. That's what this book has. So, book is called The Mountains Shall Drip Sweet Wine, and incredibly detailed. I'll just say that. And so you went into things that I had not even thought about, and I'm excited for our conversation today and to get your take on a few things and a few recurring themes that we've had on the podcast. We're going to have you weigh in on it, so we'll get your take on it. But before we do, John, we're going to talk about what we're drinking today. And I don't know how many podcasts you get to actually drink wine and talk about your book.
It's true.
So we're going to do it today. So in honor of you, here's my transition. Ready? Sometimes I try to pick a wine to go with the topic. In honor of you, because your book does a great job explaining how wine in the Bible is not just one thing, right? It's not just a good thing or a bad thing or this. It's all these things, and your book goes into all those things. So I try to figure out what's a complicated wine that I could do that's multi-layered. And I'm opening up this bottle. I got this on a recent trip to Spain. It's called Five Fincas from Peralada. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Peralada. It is the most insane winery I have ever seen in my life. I've been to a few.
Yeah.
I found out later. We didn't even know. We found this thing on TikTok. We're like, let's go check it out. It's like a top 20 winery in the world. It's all underground. It's like the cathedral of wine. This thing is absolutely beautiful. But this bottle that I'm drinking today is a red blend of 5 different vineyards that they own with 7 different varietals all in this bottle. So this is like them showing off, here's all that we have. We try to put it all together to make something. And it's beautiful color. It's a deep red. Got that Cabernet Sauvignon kind of vibe to it, but I'm getting graphite, green bell pepper, a lot of really interesting notes. So I'm enjoying this all the way from Spain. I was the importer for this. So that's what makes it extra special. Like, you did a trip, you figured out how to get it back. So I imported it.
Did you bring a case
myself.
Back? You bring a case
I did.
back?
We got a case.
Oh,
We kind of made our own case of this and a few others from there. But that's what I'm enjoying today. I brought out the good stuff for you. So John, what do you got in your glass?
Well, that's amazing. I mean, first of all, let me say I need to check out this winery, and I wish I was trying your wine with you, because that sounds fantastic. Well, I'm excited with the wine that I have as well, though. This is St. Croix Vineyards, their Marquette. Now, Marquette is a cold hardy varietal from Minnesota. It was created, it's a hybrid varietal created by University of Minnesota professors, and one of whom runs the winery out in Stillwater, Minnesota, Pete Hempstead. He's been a part of the creation of, I think, 6 or 7 different varietals. It's a winery that I volunteer at on occasion, and they let me make my own wine there too, which is fun.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's great to get the kind of hands-on, kind of experience that not growing up fundamentalist Baptist, I definitely didn't have, but especially
in your childhood.
No, and especially growing up in Vegas, in the desert, and just the kind of the farming side of winemaking, was just like really not something that I had much experience with, and so it was great to find out about them and to be kind of plugged in and to get to know the winemakers and the people who worked there, and just really loved it. But so this is a Marquette. It's a red wine, and it is probably, I'd say, kind of medium bodied. It's not super sweet. I think it's really delightful. It would maybe what would be a good comparison? Not exactly like a Pinot Noir. Maybe. I don't know what the tasting notes would be either. I'm not so great at that, but I would say it's not super sweet, it's not super fruity, but it is delightful. It is tasty, and I enjoy it for especially being something from Minnesota. I felt like I just needed to represent it, because this is where I live now. So it's delightful, and I'm glad to be enjoying this for this conversation.
Excellent. Well, cheers to you and cheers to our listeners. If you're able to enjoy a glass with us and you're not, running errands or exercising, then save your glass for later. But if you are, we hope that you can enjoy it as well.
Or perhaps if you're exercising. I mean, my mom and I like to do wine walks where we just pour wine and walk around the neighborhood. It's probably not something you should be doing, but in Las Vegas, you feel a certain freedom, I guess, and so
I suppose that's true.
That's something we have enjoyed many times.
Well, there you go, listeners. If you want to do a wine walk on today's episode while you listen, John endorses it. So there you go. That's fantastic. All right, John, as our listeners may not be familiar with your story, one of the questions I love to start with is to get a little glimpse in your journey, your own evolution as a thinker, and just your experiences with God. So I like to isolate it to the last 10 years. If you were to think about the last 10 years of your life, how would you say that your faith has changed during that time?
Yeah, well, the last 10 years is interesting. I graduated with my PhD 10 years ago this June. So that's definitely a benchmark. I don't feel like my faith has changed so drastically in the last 10 years as it probably did the 10 years before that, if that makes sense. I think that 10-year stretch, because that was a year out of high school through to the end of PhD. I feel like my faith evolved, and pun intended, actually, my faith evolved in that space, coming out of like King James onlyism, young earth creationism, a lot of the things that I, no longer ascribe to, I held, because that was just how it was. It wasn't even like, oh, I've been convinced of this and there are other options. It's like, no, this is what Christians think, right? And if you disagree with this, you're like not Christian. I remember having like the hardest time. What was that? That documentary about intelligent design by the clear eyes, red eye. What's that guy's name?
Oh yeah, Ben.
Ben. Yeah, he had a game show for a time. Anyways, can't think of the guy's name, but the documentary I think was called Expelled, and I remember just having like the hardest time watching this little bit where it said that there was like a professor at Baylor who was kicked out, or at least that was the alleged part of in the documentary. It was alleged that he was kicked out because he espoused intelligent design or something like that. And I remember thinking, wait, Baylor's a Christian school. You can't be Christian and teach biology. Because I just couldn't even like imagine that you could like believe in evolution and be a Christian, right? It's just like that's the only thing I could take away from that was like, wow, you can't be a Christian in Baylor's biology department or something like that. So I just didn't even have categories. Anyways, so a lot of transformation in that 10-year period. But in the last 10 years, it's been mostly in Minnesota, teaching it here at Bethel Seminary. And, we have gone through a lot in Minnesota, obviously currently still going through quite a bit with ICE and all of that. There's this kind of interesting kind of traumatic really kind of like, I don't know, like we're all kind of trauma bonding or something with post-COVID, the George Floyd, all this stuff, and we're kind of still going through it. But, I'd say like with a lot of other Minnesotans, just like a lot of, disillusionment in the Trump era and the kind of extended Trump era, really since 2016, right? Or 2015, it's just felt like we've been living in, as I said, we've been living in Order of the Phoenix, for the last like 10 years, Dolores Umbridge and
solid Harry Potter reference for anybody.
Yeah. And Dumbledore's army is still recruiting as
the DA baby,
as my friends like to say, and I agree. But anyways, I just I feel like there's been a lot of kind of persisting in the midst of the disillusionment. Just that's I would say a through line is just this kind of consistent sense of hope, even though in my core just like a strong sense of like there's so much injustice and there's so much absurdity, but just persisting in hope in the midst of that.
That's beautiful. Okay, I'm going to switch my questions up because I was going to get to that heaviness a little bit later, but since you've introduced it, let's go there. you're living in the ground zero for so much of what we're seeing.
Yeah.
We're watching from afar, as ICE is dehumanizing all over the place, literally killing people. As we record this recently, was watching multiple camera angles of someone get executed by the state on in the middle of the day. And so I think there's these moments, and I suspect you have this too, where it's like kind of feels weird to like enjoy wine, or like enjoy things in life when you're like everything's horrible and like the world feels like it's on fire, and like, hey, let's have a podcast, let's drink about wine. And yet I was thinking, you have this kind of theme throughout the book that you talk about with this connection to wine and the prophets. And I really like the way you brought in so much of like even God's kind of prophetic interaction with Israel throughout vineyards and all this. And so I thought maybe speak to that. How do you see, because to me, this is like an era, like I'm finding myself preaching a lot of the prophets right now and like working those into sermons. This is a prophetic season for the church. How do you see maybe that there are these overlaps where it doesn't like wine's this anomaly, but no, actually wine helps us maybe understand some of the biblical imagery that we see with this prophetic voice?
Right. Well, I just have to say, I don't understand how, you can read the prophets or even the teachings of Jesus and just think something like ICE is worth supporting. I don't understand what I see just to be a major disconnect. I mean, well, frankly, of course, it is understandable when you just take a step back and think about how, going back to the Harry Potter thing for a second, there's this great meme that was passed around. What's the difference between people who love their Bibles and people who love Harry Potter? People who love Harry Potter read Harry Potter. That's the difference. And I really resonate with that. I actually bring it up a lot when I teach hermeneutics, when I teach, intro to Bible or intro to New Testament or survey courses. We're going to be reading the text this semester because we don't do that as Christians. Yeah. Just flat out, we don't. And just acknowledging that, because otherwise I don't know how you can read the prophets and the teachings of Jesus and support any of this stuff. It just is a wild disconnect. The only way you can is if you just don't read it. Yeah. That's what I think. So the prophets are very, crystal clear about certain evils in society, and a lot of them, interestingly, do relate to, land and the cultivation of grapes and then the production of wine. And one of the things that the prophets are railing against is the socioeconomic exploitation of resources. And so things like drunkenness that, growing up, I just thought, well, yeah, it's the thing itself. It's alcohol, and alcohol makes you drunk, and you should just avoid all of that. And totally missing the way that the prophets are concerned with how these resources are being exploited and how the poor is being marginalized and neglected and these sorts of things, because people are enjoying their ability to have leisure time, these kinds of things. And that's this kind of razor sharp critique that the prophets have when it comes to something like drunkenness. And so, yeah, I think we need to be preaching on the prophets. I'm glad to hear that that's what you're doing. I remember a handful of years ago at my church, we did a sermon series called The Books We Don't Read. And it was a series on the minor prophets. And I did not love the title. I did not love the title at all, because I love the minor prophets. I love the Book of the 12. These are books that I read. But I do take seriously that the title does suggest something about our habits as readers. If we rarely read our Bibles in general, we especially aren't going to be turning to Amos or, texts like that. And of course, the title of my book is an homage to Joel and Amos, but Amos is my favorite prophet from the Book of the 12, and maybe just period. I absolutely love Amos. So I very much resonate with the question as it pertains to the need for our prophetic voice as the church. So many churches, especially even here in Minnesota, so many churches lacking the moral clarity to call out what's happening and to say that this is wrong. And, you get the both sidesism, you get the, this kind of, well, he shouldn't have been there, or she shouldn't have been there, or, these kinds of things. And it's absolutely irritating to be honest. But the prophets, as in addition to railing, they also are hopeful. There is this kind of expectation that on the other side of the judgment that will come because of the circumstances, the situation, on the other side of that, there will be restoration. And the fascinating thing is the same images that were used to speak of judgment, to speak of what's wrong with society. There's an abundance of that, right? There's mountains dripping with sweet wine, that God takes those things that have been distorted and misused and mistreated, and works his goodness with it. So I see, that is just one of the most beautiful dynamics of the biblical witness of what's going on with, alcohol.
That's great. Yeah, I was preaching Amos 5 recently, and in light of what's going on with ICE, and I would say,
and it recently being Martin Luther King Jr. Day, right? I mean, he loved that passage from Amos 5.
Yeah, and Amos 5 to me is to preach Amos 5 in a church is like the best, right? Because it's like, God talking about, I don't care about all your church services and all your worship, and if you don't have justice, like, this is all meaningless. And to me, it's like, this is like literally just teach the text. And when you apply it to current events rather than past events, because we like talking about Jesus in the past tense, but when you talk about Jesus in the present tense, literally people get up in the service and walk out and, write angry emails, to the staff. And that's what we deal with. But the majority of people lean in, they're like, oh, okay. I think you're spot on. And this is fasting on two fronts, because you're spot on the biblical illiteracy piece. Like, people today don't really read the Bible. Christians don't really. They go to church to have people tell them what the Bible says, right? Which is where you're susceptible depending on what church you go to. Because if you go to a Christian nationalist church, you're going to get heresy preached to you every week, and you're going to be told this is what the gospel is. Why I love your book is because I would say your book is addressing another topic that Christians are very biblically illiterate about, which is, what does the Bible actually say about alcohol? We usually have what we think the Bible says about alcohol. And as I was reading your book, I was just like, there are so many misperceptions that you are just slamming. I mean, and not like with bravado, just like, here's what that text actually says. Here's what we actually find. And it was one of those, I'm going, I wish every person that, sends me you shouldn't be doing a podcast with wine email.
Do you get those? Like, okay, oh, dear.
I'm just going to send them your book now. Be like, here's a link. Here's a book you need to read and get off me. Like, leave me alone. But I'm curious from your point of view. You've obviously done massive amounts of study in this. When I was reading it, I wanted to know, was there anything that surprised you as you went to a deeper level of this, that you went, oh, I didn't even realize how much this is a thing?
Oh, gosh. There's so much, right? And especially because I signed the contract back in 2013. So it has been...
Holy cow.
Yeah. So I want to spare you all of the wine fermentation puns about how
either you work really slow or that is a testament to how deep this sucker is.
I think the latter. I'm not exactly slow. And the thing is I was working on other projects. I just really wanted to do this one justice, and not that that's not the case for the others. It's just that this topic is a big topic, both because I got to talk about like how wine's made in the ancient world and these kinds of things. But I'm not doing, for example, a book on Galatians, which I've done a few, or a book on Esther, or a book on some discrete topic. I'm doing the whole sneaking Bible
survey.
so I just and I'm the kind of person that really struggles with like needing to be comprehensive. I feel like I can't start writing until I have read everything, which is like actually like a bad habit. And so I try to break myself out of it, but I can't help it sometimes. Sometimes I just won't let myself write until I feel like I have read everything. And now that's an actual impossibility. That I'm never achieving, being exhaustive, being comprehensive, but it's like something switches in my brain where it's like, okay, now I can write. And then I start writing. And so because this was the whole Bible, I really felt like to do this topic justice, I'm going to need to keep asking for extensions, which I did do. I asked for a few. So, many thanks to Katja Kovret at Zondervan for allowing them. But yeah, so I want to say it's more of the latter, where it's not that I'm a slow writer, but I did want to just make sure that I dove as deeply as I needed to. Now, along the way, lots of surprises, and I'm trying to think what would be a great example of like oh wow. I mean, I can think of certain ones where the depth just was shocking. So the sour wine episodes, I don't even really go into it much in the book. I turned it into an article because I was going so deep into kind of, thinking about, okay, so you've got some wine offerings to Jesus in Matthew and Mark that are mixed with something. Mark says it's myrrh, Matthew says it's gall. But then in all four Gospels, you have sour wine given to Jesus while he's on the cross. And I just was like, oh man, this is kind of confusing. There's a lot of different things going on and the details are kind of different. Like, is Luke's offering, his single offering, is it a dissimilar like third offering, or is it like a conflation of the two? Same with John. You look at John and you're like, is this John's version of, what we read about in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, or is this a different one even? Now, what's interesting is when you get to the early Christian reception of this, it just conflates everything into a single offering of sour wine mixed with gall, which is fascinating because sour wine is not mixed with anything in any of the Gospels, and gall is only mentioned in the first offering of Matthew. So I was like, okay, I can't talk about this in the book, but I was like, I want to do an article and I want to like really dive into like how early Christians are understanding this, and they leverage it in some like horrible ways and really based upon, I would say, a misreading of Psalm 69, where they want to see it as prophetic and that the gospel authors are developing something prophetic, but they twist it for the kind of anti-Jewish potential of what that would mean then. And they all the imprecations of the psalm, they like just toss at their Jewish opponents, and it becomes this highly polemical, highly anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish thing. Anyways, I was really shocked by all of that, of course, but that's more of a reception thing. But there were a handful of places where, I just started diving deeper than I thought possible, thinking about like Ephesians 5, 5:18, don't be drunk with wine, in which is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit. Thinking about that passage a little bit more deeply, I was so fascinated by how the immediate sort of reaction of being filled with the Spirit, or potentially the way to be filled with the Spirit, there's a debate about this. Either way, it's singing and worship and giving thanks and all these things. And I just was so overwhelmed by that, thinking about like, well, what are the contexts in which singing occurs in the Bible? Is in the temple. This is Levitical activity. Being filled with the Spirit is a kind of temple motif. Drunkenness is not something that priests are supposed to like experience while serving. It's just like, I was like, well, I think there's temple imagery here. And then, of course, Ephesians has a lot of interesting temple, explicit passages, and then some passages that allude to the temple in various ways. Just being kind of like, surprised by all these connections that I was noticing, or like Wedding at Cana, where, that's a discrete passage that like, everybody brings up all the time with this topic, right? If you're somebody who enjoys wine and you're a Christian, and you have ever had any kind of a debate with anybody who thinks Christians shouldn't drink, the go-to response is, well, did you know Jesus turned water into wine, right? And then, you know, that's about as far as it goes. It's kind of just the slam dunk, you know, kind of argument for why Christians can drink. Well, Jesus turned water into wine. But I was just really impressed by, you know, thinking about the ceremonial jars, or the jars that are made of stone because stone is impervious to ritual impurity. I go more for the latter point than the idea that these are jars that are strictly used for hand washing. I think rather these are jars used for drinking water. But that idea of like even bringing up ritual purity in this passage, like ritual purity is of primary importance with respect to the temple. You don't go into sacred space impure. And so thinking about that, and then thinking about, of course, well, what does John do uniquely is he sets the wedding at Cana right before the temple cleansing, right? The scene that the synoptics say happened right before Jesus is executed. Yeah, and that makes historically that makes the most sense, that the guy who did that would be killed by the state. That makes complete sense, right? You can't get away with a stunt like that, basically. So I think John has moved it forward, and a lot of scholars do, right? But it's like, well, why? And I think there's an interplay between Cana and the temple cleansing that isn't, you know, usually talked about, which is when you look at the prophetic expectation of abundance of wine, and you think about the prophetic and larger biblical association with the quality wine being associated with the temple. I think this abundance of wine, the 6 jars that can hold 120 to 180 gallons of water that now have wine in them, that abundance, right? I think that this is tapping into some of the notions of the temple's association with wine. And so, you know, those are some of the things, of course, that I argue for and develop in my book. That I was surprised. I was surprised at how much depth, you know, in certain passages that I think are there. I was surprised to find what I found in certain cases. But in general, I mean, I just had a blast working on it. You know, I have a master's in Old Testament, a master's in New Testament, and I just enjoyed that I was able to, you know, do a full Bible, you know, sort of biblical theology and a project on a single theme, and it's great because as a New Testament scholar, you know, you're supposed to kind of, you know, quote unquote, stay in your lane. But as somebody with ADHD, you know, I have a lot of lanes, and so I liked, you know, being able to dive into, you know, all these different areas of biblical scholarship that, you know, a lot of New Testament scholars might not get to.
Well, I'm glad for the record you didn't stay in your lane, because it's a fantastic resource. And
cheers.
It's one of those, you know, it's like, wow, I'll be referencing, you know, passages, or, you know, I can see teaching you know, things in the future, like, oh, I'm going to go back and see what John said about that and rehash it. One of the things you said, I had not considered this. This was a surprise to me of like, oh, that's a really intriguing idea. Is a connection you made with Galatians 5 and the fruit of the Spirit. I use Galatians 5 a lot in my preaching today. And the reason why is because I think Christians are in a season where we're very much about rules and you know, kind of guardrails or guidelines of like what's allowed, you know, to do, what's not allowed to do. Can these people, you know, be included or not? And I think of the way we've even talked about, you know, can we include the gay community? Are they in or are they out? And like, the way that those conversations happen, a lot of times I try to take people like step back and go, okay, is there anything about this lifestyle that prohibits the fruit of the Spirit, like inherently prohibits it? And if the answer is no, then let's be open-minded to that as a possibility of what we can live, right? Because if that's not negating or hindering and could even be enhancing the fruit of the Spirit, like there's something there. So I find like this is a passage I just preach a lot right now, and I think like Christians like have this on the forefront of your mind. Galatians 5, we can get so caught up in this to be this or that. Why is ice bad? How about you compare it to fruit of the Spirit? I mean, like it works on everything, right? Like it's what it should look like at the end of the day. Here's a quote you say in the book that I think is so fascinating, and I'm like, I want to have you just vamp on this. You write this: the ninefold nature of the singular fruit of the Spirit resembles a grape cluster with 9 grapes. So you're talking about the fruit of the Spirit. Now you're talking about it being wine. And I was like, praise Jesus, John. This is beautiful. I already like the image. Now I'm thinking of the image as a grape cluster. That's fantastic. Expand on that, because this is incredible.
Well, so, it's often said as a kind of misstatement, right, that Paul talks about the fruits of the Spirit. And it is technically singular, but there's 9 of them, right? And so people are like, well, thinking about like, what's the image? And I think the best way to conceive of a singular, but like, distinctive set of, elements of that fruit is a cluster of grapes. And that, I think, is, I think that's a great image. I think that works. I mean, what other fruit has that kind of, maybe can think of like something like pomegranate seeds or something like that. And actually, I wrote a short book on Galatians called "Reading Galatians," and the cover art is a pomegranate. So and that was the association. It wasn't my choice, but I appreciate them, picking a fruit for the cover, because I do think the fruit of the Spirit is really important. I love your kind of like hermeneutic of the fruit of the Spirit when thinking about ethics. I think that's great. I would have liked a grape cluster on the cover of the Reading Galatians book, but I already have a book with a grape cluster on the front of it. So
all your books are just grapes.
Yeah. So a pomegranate, is good for some diversity, I guess. But the other thing about the fruit of the Spirit too is like, it's so interesting how it's abstracted, and this is a point I make in that short book, Reading Galatians, as part of the Cascade Companions. The way that the fruit of the Spirit is often talked about too is it's so abstracted from Paul's argument in Galatians. Like, it's so often, something that like will be like maybe in a little Bible study. It's like on some chevron on someone's notebook or something like that. And it's like, no, this is part of an argument. And not only that, but just a few verses before that, like the same guy who's talking about love, joy, peace, and like all this stuff, and even gentleness, he says, I wish, referring to my opponents, I wish they would cut the whole thing off, right? Galatians 5:12, just a few verses before that. And I just think, okay, when we're talking about the fruit of the Spirit too, we have to keep in mind it's not just like this, particular, set of like abstract virtues, but like it's part of like Paul's gospel too, and it shouldn't be abstracted from that. So I very much think like that fruit of the Spirit is so important and so crucial, and it, of course, I think also needs to be kept in its context as part of Paul's argument for the role of the Spirit in Christian life. There's some interesting discussion about what's going on, with the Jew-Gentile dynamic in the letter. But I would say for Christian life, anybody in Christ, the spiritual role of anyone who's in Christ.
Well, I just think we should offer, when you have a nice glass of vino, it's liquid fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah.
Like
Cheers.
That's how I'm going to drink it now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Just
no, that's great.
imbibing the fruit of the Spirit into my life. Okay, you address something in the book that I think most people are very aware of, but they probably don't know what it's called, and it's the 2 wine theory.
Oh,
and as you were talking about it, I thought this is such a good thing. We've never addressed this on an episode yet, but I think it'd be really good. It's probably something a lot of evangelicals have grown up with without realizing it. Like, I never heard it called this, but I definitely grew up with this idea and have heard it a ton. So describe, what is the 2 wine theory and why is it bullshit? Let's go there.
Yeah, it's complete bullshit. Exactly. So what is it? So 2 wine theory is the idea that maybe some of the references, not all, but maybe some of the references, about half actually, references to wine in the Bible aren't really referring to wine as we might think of it in terms of like an alcoholic beverage, but actually it's just referring to grape juice. So like basically half of the references in the Bible to wine are actually to grape juice. And the reason why half wouldn't be is because, well, there is drunkenness in the Bible, and there are these kind of like, negative passages about, what wine can do. And so really kind of the way that people who hold to this two wine theory operate is they say, well, if there's negative associations and if there's drunkenness implied, then that's alcoholic wine. But if there's anything positive, if anything is beneficial, then that must be grape juice, right? Now, this is, basically an a priori decision, right? People who hold this view, they've basically already determined that there can't be anything positive that's said about an alcoholic beverage in the Bible, right? Mm-hmm. Now, what ends up happening is there are a couple of, I guess, I want to kind of do it in scare quotes. There are a couple of scholars who have argued for this. I want to put it in scare quotes because this is not taken seriously by scholars, to be clear. But within certain ideological, ideologically bounded groups, this stuff is really popular and influential. And a lot of readers might see this section of my book, like in chapter 2, and just think, oh, we're past this. And it's like, yeah, but I tried to write this book for anyone, not just people who drink, but anyone. And that includes people who might actually still hold to this view or not realize that they are influenced by this perspective. And they don't actually know why it's wrong and why it can't be right. And so a lot of it just boils down to not understanding how fermentation works, not understanding what happens when you crush a grape, that there's yeast on the skin, in the air, on the equipment, etc., that is going to naturally start the fermentation process. And fermentation gets going straight away. And it can be extended over a period of time, depending on conditions like temperature and whatever else. But it is something that will get going. And you can't stop that without understanding how it works in the first place. And ancient people definitely didn't understand how it works. It just happened. It was a miraculous thing. It was like a divine touch, And when contemporary people look at wine in the Bible and say, well, there can't be, all these references to alcohol, they're first of all importing a modern kind of prejudice onto the ancient world that wasn't there. But also they start to make some assumptions about how wine is made that just do not work. So for example, I was just watching some Jesus films because I have a book on Jesus films coming out in a couple weeks with my colleague Janine Brown, and we're teaching a class on Jesus films. I just watched this film called The Last Supper from 2025. It was made by PureFlix, which is an evangelical film film company. And there's this scene. Well, it's the Last Supper, of course, but you see the bitter herbs. So this is very much like Passover Seder kind of vibe. You see the bitter herbs, and then you see this plate of grapes. There would not be grapes in the springtime. Grapes are harvested in late summer, early fall, and then you either turn them into raisins or you turn them into wine. You cannot preserve them all the way to the springtime, right? So you might think, oh, that's just a kind of harmless, whatever. It's just, the decor on the table. Except for the fact that right after you see those prominent grapes on the table, this wine merchant guy comes up to the host where they're celebrating it, in the upper room. And he's like, oh, I brought this from Cana. And so there's a fun little nod there, right? Oh, I brought this from Cana, and he says, it's the freshly pressed grape nectar. Oh my goodness. You're saying I've brought grape juice for this occasion. which is ridiculous. No one is drinking grape juice in the spring, right?
Was his name Mr. Welch?
Yeah, exactly. There is no grape juice. You cannot preserve grape juice. You cannot make grape juice. You're not having freshly pressed grape nectar for this celebration. So it's very obvious that this is, trying to say they weren't drinking something alcoholic at the Last Supper. So you can't have grape juice throughout the year. You can only have grape juice immediately when the grapes are harvested. But the fermentation process is going to begin. So you genuinely have the narrowest of windows to consume grape juice. Even the terms in Hebrew that likely do refer to freshly trodden grape must, even those terms, and there's this one term, asis, which occurs 5 times. There's a passage in Isaiah where that asis is very clearly intoxicating. So even grape must is recognized as intoxicating. So it just doesn't work. And you would expect, I think, if the Bible and ancient Jewish authors and early Christian authors, right? If they were so concerned to get this right, you wouldn't use the same set of terms, right? You would have clearly delineated terms, right? If they shared your prejudice against alcohol, you would expect that they would have delineated terms. Now, there are different kinds of terms, but they do not map onto this kind of thing. All the different kinds of terms can intoxicate. There's so many examples of this, but also it's fun when you find one of these positive passages that it's taken to be grape juice because it's positive. So a good example would be Isaiah or Psalm 114, that God has provided all of these things, including wine that gladdens the heart. Now that gladdening the heart, that's a euphemism for intoxication, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a great example of a positive passage where there is something inebriating about that wine. But of course, that's not going to be conceded by anybody who holds the 2 wine theory, right? Another great example is the wedding at Cana, right? Where it's okay, Jesus made wine. But again, the person who holds the 2 wine theory could say, well, that was grape juice. Well, and this is where knowing Greek is so helpful, because the master of the banquet says, once everyone is drunk, that's what the Greek term is, methusko. Once everyone is drunk, you bring out the lesser wine, but you've kept the good stuff for now, right? And in English, it's euphemistically rendered once everyone has had their fill, which if you actually pause to think about what that would mean, does imply, that you're at least a little tipsy, right? Everyone's had their fill. It's a euphemism, but it does imply some type of inebriation, right? Well, the text in Greek is explicit. Once everyone is drunk, you bring out the lesser, but you've kept the good stuff until now. And yeah, I mean, think about it, right? Jesus has provided an abundance of wine after they've run out of wine.
I mean,
you know what I mean? It's after they've run out. It's not like there was no wine. It's they've run out
of all that they thought would be needed.
Yeah, exactly.
For the entire thing.
Exactly.
I'll be honest, John. I think if I lived in those days, and again, you're pointing out something that we tend to forget. They didn't understand what was happening with wine. They didn't understand how it turned into what it is. We have the science today to explain that, control it in ways that would have made no sense to them. I suspect just wine alone, having a great glass of wine, I would have been like, God has to be real, right? We don't know how this turned into this, but God, there's got to be a God because this is magical.
Exactly. It is magic.
I still feel that today with a good glass of wine, and I know how it's made.
This is one of the things that I love that you said that, because this is one of the things that I hope that we can cultivate, which is the ancient enchantment with wine. We don't have the same palate as them. We aren't using the same products as them. We aren't making wine with the same processes. But the biggest difference, as has been described by some really great writers on the history of wine, is our perception. We don't think of wine the same way. Wine is, we got $2 Chuck, we got grocery stores full of wine. But ancient people looked at wine and thought magic. They thought miracle. They thought divine. And we have lost that. So I love that you said that. I know how it's made, and I still think that. And I want to say, amen. Exactly. That's exactly right. That's what we need to be cultivating. So I appreciate that.
Love it. Well, your book's helping us to get there. Okay, one of the things you talk about that's really, I think, a helpful thing, and I don't think we have a ton of conservative listeners on this podcast. Shout out if you're listening, and you are. We're glad you're here.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Mad props.
Yeah, if you have made it this far on this podcast, it says something great about you, in all seriousness. But here's what I would say. I grew up with a very, I would say, black and white understanding of alcohol. Alcohol was bad. It led to drunkenness. End of story, right? There was, this clear idea of like, the reason you don't drink is because it leads to being drunk, and drunk is bad. Bible says it's bad. Like, never more complicated than that. Since then, I've obviously come around on that. You have this quote that I thought gets to this issue. You say the critique of drunkenness in the Bible is not straightforwardly a matter of excess per se, but rather it is a matter of some failure or tragedy that could ensue from it, not only actively, but also passively. Now, this is a huge point that you get into in a variety of chapters in a variety of ways, but I want to just have you at least boil down the Reader's Digest version of this argument that we think, it's just, like somehow there's an imaginary line of the being drunk line, right? And if you cross that line, you've committed sin. And the funny part, and again, if you have a logical conversation with someone, it breaks down quickly because you're like, well, how do you know when the line is? Totally. And the line can't be based on what you drink because everybody processes alcohol different. So it can't be like, well, it's 2 glasses. Can't be that. Has to be, well, is it when you feel it, or when, are we talking blood alcohol content? Like where, what else that? What you argue in the book, and what I think is just a great Christian practice, is that the bigger issue is, what do you do if you have that amount of wine, right?
Exactly.
So, which goes back to my argument about fruit of the Spirit. Are you displaying things that are in contrast to that? Because if so, now we've got a problem. But the problem isn't that you drink. The problem is what you're actually doing. You're hinting at that, going, look, the issue is not just this line. It's what does it cause you to do? Why don't you speak more on that? Because I think people don't think this part through.
Yeah, so I think that the dynamic in a lot of biblical texts is, it's not the drunkenness per se. It's what you do, and also a lot of the warnings are about what can happen to you when you're drunk, right? There's so many examples of, violent exploitation or sexual exploitation, or you could even say just like not being prepared for judgment, right? For divine judgment, right? Being drunk in this kind of eschatological sense instead of being sober-minded in this, again, eschatological sense. And I think that so often, we just reduce it down to the thing itself. And as you very well said, it is such a moving target to define, like, well, when's tipsiness and when's drunkenness, and like, are they conflated, or all of those things are tricky and hard to navigate and super unclear, and everybody has a different definition and understanding. But I think we have to take seriously, like, what's the context in which we're drinking? Like, is it a safe environment? And like, what am I likely to do in a setting in which I am, having, 2 glasses of wine or 3 glasses of wine, and if it is the case that like there is like a certain threshold for yourself where that like, I tend to start talking really silly when I've had 3 beers or something like that. Okay, so like let's not get to the 3 beer line then. You know what I mean? Like everyone's gonna kind of have that kind of personal sense of like, because people talk like this all the time. They'll say something like, oh, I know I'll have a headache if I have an extra glass, or I know I'll blank if I whatever. And I think that same kind of perception or like sense of like one's own agency with respect to like what alcohol the effects that it can have on you. I think you just need to be as wise as you would when you're thinking about things like headaches or like a hangover or whatever. And so I think that's Yeah, that's part of the big picture. And so drunkenness gets lumped in with a lot of other vices, and I think largely because of what the drunkard is likely to do or not do. So it's not just sins of commission, if you like, but also sins of omission. So that goes back to the kind of exploitation of resources argument where, well, if you are, indulging X, Y, and Z, does that mean then that you are not committing, that you're not exercising your responsibility to the other, that you're not caring for the poor, that you're not using your resources for others, that you're not, able to conduct your, your job, your responsibilities in every arena that you can think of. If that's impaired by your consumption of alcohol, that's a problem, right? So I think drunkenness has so many different sort of like issues with it, and it's not really just boiling down to, well, you've just drunk, a little bit too much. It's okay. All of those factors that can happen, that you do or don't do, or that can happen to you, need to be, I think, factored into what we think about the problem with drunkenness in the Bible and the warnings against it in the Bible.
Well, and I would just add to that, a lot of the things that we do with Communion Wine Co. are either events with wine, trips with wine. And so I get to be kind of a guide, guiding experiences with a lot of people who have a lot of different alcohol tolerances, who respond differently. And so I've done this enough now where I've seen how different people react different ways to different things. And, like even some of our trips, so like how many wine tastings is the right amount in a day, right? Like I started off with 3 and I realized that's too much for people. So I dialed it down, and then they're like, we want more. It's like, well, I've learned that, all this. But I've also seen, just practically, some people become nicer versions of themselves when they drink. And they're more thoughtful. They're more caring. They're more attuned to their neighbor. Other people become
and perhaps
meaner
to
versions
God
of
as
themselves.
well. Perhaps
Absolutely.
To God as well.
And so I've always said that to people of like, hey, just so you know, from anecdotal evidence of my own experience doing this, not everybody has the same formula of what happens to them when they drink. So I love that you said like, have your own assessment of like, if I do this, what does it lead to? And that's a deeper level of thinking. It's a deeper level of maturity than just, I crossed a line I shouldn't have, or, I'm going to stay away from the line. It's like, no, what is it actually producing in me? Is it good? Is it healthy? Am I in control of it? Or is it, spinning out? And where are you doing it? Are you in an environment where you're safe and people, and it's a celebration, or that was scary that there's so many other things. And that's why I just love that you address this, because I think that's what's missing in so much of our conversations today about drunkenness in general.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, I want to have you weigh in on something that Gisela Kreglinger said on the podcast.
Excellent.
So I know you're very familiar with her. We had her on episode 42. So listeners, if you want to go back and listen to the context of what I'm about to share, she shared, this is her phrase, and I think it's such a good phrase. She talked about the value of holy tipsiness.
Yeah. Right.
Which is the idea that, we've been hinting at, that you intentionally drink a little bit too much because good things happen and you experience others and God in this way. What are your thoughts on holy tipsiness from the scholarly point of view?
So I love Gisela. She's a friend of mine. We overlapped at St. Andrews for a bit. When I first met her, it was so fun because I was like, I'm working on a book on wine. She's like, I'm working on a book on wine. Because again, my contract goes back to 2013. And so when I met her, it was before her Spirituality of Wine came out, which I think was 2015 with Erdmans. But it was so fun to be like, wow, we're both in small town in Scotland writing for different publishers in Grand Rapids about wine in the Bible. This is awesome. But no, I have learned a lot from Gisela. I've been to different wine tastings with Gisela. I've read all of her books, and I love the concept of holy tipsiness. So how do I think about it from a scholarly perspective? I don't think a category like tipsiness works with the Bible. That's not a critique of Gisela, to be clear. I just don't think the Bible is super helpful for delineating something like drunkenness versus like tipsiness, but there are these references, like, you know, these euphemisms, as I mentioned, like being gladdened in the heart and these kinds of things. And what I want to say is that those must refer to the effects of alcohol, but I do think it's shy of drunkenness. And so I want to draw a line there. And I think that's closer to the kind of thing that Gisela would be talking about. Obviously a term like tipsiness would of course be heuristic. So it's hard to know, like, where would we find evidence for it outside of like those euphemistic passages? There is an interesting passage that I sometimes think about, in addition to the wedding at Cana, where there's this reference to drunkenness. In Genesis, the end of Genesis, you have this scene of drunkenness that is sometimes not even rendered such in like English translations. It's Joseph and his brothers. It's when they are reunited, but Joseph hasn't revealed his identity just yet. So this is the setting in which Joseph puts his little seer cup, you know, in Benjamin's like sack or whatever. And it's just interesting that the text describes that they're getting drunk, but nothing happens. Nothing bad happens. No one gets killed. No, you know, you could say that there's trickery there because Joseph hides the cup in there, and it's part of his little scheme to like get them to come back or whatever. But it's interesting because Genesis has some like gnarly drunkenness scenes. You know,
got quite a few of them.
Yeah, like obviously the first one with Noah. You know, he's butt ass naked, presumably. I mean, you could interpret it a different way, and I respect the scholars who want to say that this is either maternal or paternal incest. I think if I had to choose between the two, the maternal incest view is a little bit better because you immediately have the cursing of Canaan, and it doesn't make sense why the offspring of Ham would be, you know, cursed here. So I don't go that route. That's not my view, but I would pick that view over the paternal incest view personally. I go for something like the traditional view because I think there's too many allusions back to the story of Adam and Eve and the just new creational connections that I find just a little bit more striking to me personally. But regardless, you know, you have this man who's just invented wine, right? He's just gotten drunk. It's this great kind of like Frankenstein's monster thing, like Noah doesn't realize what he's created. Yeah, it's excellent. It's excellent. But then you got Lot and his daughters, and that's freaking gnarly. And then you have, what is it, Jacob and Laban. So Laban, the whole thing with, you know, Rachel and Leah, and that's like, it's implied. I don't know if wine is mentioned, but it's definitely a mishteh. So the Hebrew means that there's a drinking party, that there's something going on.
I had actually never had that thought till I read that in your book, that wine was involved. I always thought, like, how dark did it have to be? You know, and I'm like, they don't have lights and all that. Yeah. I had never even, I don't know why, I never even had the thought that there was alcohol involved. And when I read that in your book, I was like, oh, that would make a lot more sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that explains a little bit of the trickery there. But it's just interesting that you've got weird drunkenness scenes in Genesis, and then nothing really happens with Joseph and his brothers. Now, I'm not clear, but that is just an interesting example that highlights the importance of are like really important for thinking about, you know, how much have you drunk, you know, etc. So yeah, I love the concept of holy tipsiness. I don't know if I use that term. I might in the conclusion. I can't remember if I do in my book. I might cite her, but I do love it. I'm a fan of Gisela, and I do love that concept.
Okay, here's another hot take I want to get your response to. I was talking with a winemaker, Christian winemaker, and we were talking about John too. And obviously, you know, he's talking about how much he loves that, and he makes wine for a living, and you know all this. He offered a suggestion that I had never heard of before, and I haven't been able to turn this off since I heard it, and I always thought this was fascinating. His take on why Jesus, you know, has that conversation with his mother, and she's like, "Hey, do whatever he tells you," and just kind of like assumes all this. his take was that Jesus had done it before, that he had made wine out of water, which is why she even comes to him and says, hey, they ran out of wine, because she knew, because it is kind of missing in the text of like, why did she jump to that conclusion? And then why does she just assume he's able to do this? That seems like a pretty big jump, which I agree. Once you see it, you're like, that is kind of a lot to assume, unless he had already done it. And then the phrase he said to me is, that he thinks his mom said to him, hey, Jesus, do the thing. Like, the thing you do, like, do the thing. Because like he had shown that he had done this in the past. Floating that out there, John, what's your response to that?
So, I mean, first response is I love it. Second response is it's always so curious why Mary is so confident. And it raises all kinds of interesting questions. This is one of the gaps in the text. What did she know? Or what did she expect to happen? And why, right? The why could be because he's done it before. Or the why could be because she knows that, miracles are going to ramp up in the run up to his hour. And that's what he says to her, right? What is it between you and me? The Greek is interesting. What is it between you and me? Like, my hour has not yet come. And there is this idea that Jesus is public about doing this that puts him on an immediate trajectory. Mean it's the very first miracle. And so it is interesting to consider, like, had Jesus done a miracle before this or not? I think a traditional view is to say sign is just John's way of talking about miracles, and this is the first time Jesus did anything miraculous. But it is interesting that it seems like John has chosen particular miracles or instances to highlight who Jesus is so that you might believe and have life in his name, as he says later, right? That it's not that these are the only miracles, and then that might mean that Cana wasn't necessarily the first one, but these are the ones that you can know that you have life because of them. And so that changes the game a little bit when you think about it. I tend to be on the side of it's his first miracle. And so the question of like, well, what did Mary know? Like, did Jesus do things as a kid? So that's where you get like interesting, like, infancy gospels, these non-canonical texts, right? Where Jesus was doing things. And there's a couple of Jesus films, going back to the Jesus film stuff. There's a couple of Jesus films where Jesus does Cana-like miracles as a kid. Like there's one Mexican film where young Jesus. Something right here, right now. It's a delightful little gap in the text, and all we can do is fill it in. Because even if you say, no, he never did miracles before, it's not like you're not filling in the text, you're just filling it in a different way. Right. So we're at the end of the day, we're all just filling in the gaps.
Because why did Mary, or what did Mary know? Why did she assume he could do it? What did Jesus know? Because that's the other thing. Like, did Jesus know he could do that at that point if he had never done it? And again, John is teasing something out, which Jesus' time doesn't come till chapter 12. So it's not really, he's not saying, hey, now that he's doing signs, his time has come, because that's not going to come for a while in the narrative. So it does kind of, to me, opens the door a little bit of like, these are things Jesus was already doing, not necessarily like Jesus is official, like this is going to begin it, but it's like, okay, I'll do this. I'm not going to roll this out for 10 more chapters, guys. I got 10 more chapters to go here, but I don't know. I've always thought that was such an interesting, obviously not in the text, but this is where I think it's fun to use our imaginations to dive into these stories and go like, what was going on there? Is this a party trick that Jesus did and they all loved him for it? I would pull it out if I could.
I definitely love it. I definitely love it as a suggestion. I'm not sure if I think that's the best way of understanding it, but I have to say I do like it.
Okay, we'll take it at that, and we'll move on. All right, I want to get to some questions I like to ask each of our guests, and I'm especially excited to hear your answers to these. First one being, and you're going to have to probably narrow this down, but I like to ask people, if you were to think about the best glass of wine you've ever had in your life, that you just think, like, that was as good as I could ever imagine drinking a glass of wine. Is there one memory that immediately pops up, and what could you tell us about it? Was it a specific bottle, specific grape, a place, people you were with? What story comes to your mind?
This is very hard, and it's one of those things where I might have a different answer if you asked me a little bit later. But I think what comes to mind, and it's not like this is like the best wine of all time or anything like that, but it's a bottle that my family really loves. My mom and my sister, my brother, and my sister-in-law, and I think my brother-in-law has had it. But really, it's something that I discovered with my mom, and we've kind of become big fans of. It's this producer called Macchia. I think it's from Lodi, and it's a wine. It's a Petit Syrah, and it's called Dubious. And specifically, we love the 2015 vintage. I have one bottle left of it, and I've been sitting on it, and I have no idea when I'll open it. But we try the new vintages every year, and we always appreciate them. But we always talk fondly of the 2015. So I feel like the bottle that I have talked like most nostalgically about, like over and over again, is the 2015 Dubious. So I have, like I said, I have one bottle of those. I don't know if they're being sold anywhere, at like major wine retailers. It might go back a couple vintages, this particular Petit Syrah Dubious, but yeah, I don't see anything from 2015 anymore. So I've kind of been holding on to that one for a while. So it's definitely not the best. I mean, it's like a $40 bottle of wine, so it's like a respectable price, but it's not like, it's not going to break anyone's bank. Like anybody could give it a go if they wanted to, but like, I've thought very fondly about that wine. So I think I have to say that one. I'm sure objectively I've had better wines, because I do love wine tourism and traveling and trying different things, but I'm going to go with that one.
Love it. All right. Which member of church history would you trust to pick out a bottle of wine for you, and who would you not trust?
Oh dear, that's such a good. Marcian. Why would anybody trust Marcian with anything? I feel like I have to say Marcian, or like, there's other people who are influenced by kind of strong ascetic perspectives. Tatian, the guy who put together the Diatessaron, I suspect, he was not a fan of wine for a couple different reasons, and so I could say him as well. Who would I trust? I feel like I should name some Cistercian monk off the top of my head, but I don't have one ready to go. Who would I trust? Goodness. Well, Calvin was French, so let's go with that.
Yeah, he probably had some good experience with wine.
Let's just go with that. He's close. Geneva's close enough. Let's go with Calvin. I have no idea what I don't actually know about his wine consumption.
He has some beautiful wine quotes, actually.
Okay.
I'm gonna butcher this off the top of my head, but some comparison of how our hearts are gladdened by wine and how we can equally be gladdened by the Spirit of God or something. And just like this comparison using wine in a very favorable sense. So I think John Calvin's probably a safe.
Okay. I mean, if you had asked about beer, and I'm fundamentally a beer guy, I should say. Martin Luther, of course. You just know you're gonna have a good time if you grab a beer with that guy.
Ironically, he comes up on a lot of people's lists of who they wouldn't ask because they are like, oh, he would be, and I'm like, he probably would be pretty solid even on wine. Like he probably would help you out, but he has shown up on a lot of people's do not ask list for whatever reason.
Interesting. So.
Okay. What's something you used to believe that it turned out later you were wrong about?
Okay, wrong about makes that question hard because saying I'm wrong about it would mean that I'm certain that I'm now right about it. Do you know what I mean? And that's hard. Okay,
you're certain that your previous beliefs were crazy. How about that?
Well, I mean, how about my views on alcohol, right? I thought alcohol was just straightforwardly evil, and yeah, I mean that's definitely one of them. I mean, I could lump a whole host of things alongside that. I mean, King James onlyism, and I already mentioned a handful of things, but yeah, certainly my views on alcohol. I'm sure I'm wrong about that because there's just no way that ancient people had the same kind of prejudices that post-prohibition conservative Christian America had.
Now you talk about drinking with your mom.
Yeah.
So she's not Baptist anymore, or has made the switch with you, or how's that been with I guess whoever brought you up in that culture? That do they look at you of like you're a wayward son, or they've kind of done the journey with you?
Yeah, done the journey with me. So it's interesting because, my mom used to drink. My parents were nominal Catholics, and they really became serious about their faith when I was about 3 or 4, and they became Protestant, and they got connected to a Calvary Chapel. And Calvary Chapel isn't fundamentalist Baptist, but I was put into a fundamentalist Baptist school. And that was, very formative, chapels, etc. And what I've realized in hindsight is that although at the time growing up, I thought the Calvary Chapel was the, liberative, tradition over against my super conservative, rigid, Baptist school, I've realized how complementary actually it all was. That the only difference was you wear ties with the Baptists and you wear Hawaiian shirts at Calvary Chapel. But all their views were like the exact same, other than tongues. And that was the thing that I loved to debate, because I was like, oh yeah, my church, we say we believe in tongues. You'll never ever see any of that happen at our Calvary Chapel. But we say we believe in it, and that makes us edgy and cool, because at my Baptist school, they're all cessationists. You know what I mean? Like I just remember being like that was like the edgy thing. But it was very fundamentalist still, right? Like, even though at the Calvary Chapel, they weren't all King James onlyists, but they did think the Textus Receptus was the best, and all the Bibles were New King James. And they would say, like, if you want to be a serious, studier of the Bible, if you want to really dive in, you got to get yourself a King James Bible. Like, they would talk like that, regularly. And I just realized how actually this is all very complimentary. And but my parents did come along for the journey, I guess you could say. My parents, when they became Christian, I don't think they really had a clear sense of like, well, what does it mean to be like? Well, it's whatever we're kind of being told by the people at Calvary or people at the school. And so, oh yeah, if that means no alcohol, then that means no alcohol. And my mom was kind of happy to get this. And that's for, reasons connected to his upbringing and his alcoholic father, etc. And he never acquired a taste for it. But yeah, as I started to become a fan of craft beer, years later, my parents opened up to the idea of like me drinking, and then eventually my mom started to like circle back to the idea of like maybe I can start having wine again. And there was a period of time where I would have said something like, thinking about Romans 14 and 15 and the kind of like, the argument that's commonly reduced to like weaker brother, stronger brother. And it's like, the way that Paul talks about conscience, I think, is really interesting. And it's kind of like, if you can consume wine in good conscience, then it's not sin. But then we have to think like, wait, if you can't consume the wine in good conscience, you're sinning against your conscience, and like that's sin. And it's like, whoa, that's really interesting. So there was a time where I would say like, yeah, I can drink, but my mom can't. Because she can't in good conscience. So it would be a sin for her to drink. And so she shouldn't. But she was able to kind of get past that. And so now she can drink in good conscience. And so, it has been an interesting journey. And then part of that journey is my teetotaling dad and I make beer together.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we make beer. In fact, right now we've got a couple of batches that are fermented, that have fermented, that we're racking. We're doing a couple of different things. They're stouts, coffee chocolate stouts, and we have them aging on some oak chips that I've soaked in Ardbeg single malt Scotch, and to give it a little bit of that kind of peated oaky flavor.
Yeah.
And then we'll rack it and then probably bottle it in a couple of weeks. But anyways, yeah, my dad's super into it.
And he doesn't drink anything that you
He
make?
doesn't drink any of it. No. He's Walter White. I'm Jesse Pinkman. So we have fun. We have fun making it together. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Your dad is Walter White. That's so fantastic. Oh, okay, I love that. What do you see as the main issue facing Christianity in America right now?
Oh gosh.
Pick
it's
one.
It's Christian nationalism. I think that's pretty obvious. We have so conflated our American identities and the desires of empire with the kingdom of God, with Christianity, and we can't differentiate the prerogatives of America from the prerogatives of the church, and that's just it's a complete tragedy. There's nothing Christian about it. It's a false gospel, and it just needs to be rejected. Full stop.
Amen. I love it. What's something that's blowing your mind right now? What are you learning?
Oh dear. Something that's blowing my mind. I'm in such a prep for the spring semester mode. I've been rewatching bits of Jesus films for this class and putting my lectures together. I'm not presently reading something. What am I reading? Actually, what I am reading is a book on Ted Lasso. It's a book on theology and religion in Ted Lasso, and I just rewatched season 3 in preparation for reading this book it's not out yet. This book is not out yet, so I'm writing an endorsement for it, and I think the way that the show highlights this kind of hopeful positivity, well balanced with the real world, and our interest in telling the story of how did this empire come about? Is like, we are particularly interested in that story because it so mirrors our situation. And it's kind of blowing my mind that like people can watch Andor and be like, oh, it's a great little Star Wars show, and not be like, oh shit, Andor 3 is happening all around us.
I saw a little debate on Threads today. Someone's like, how do you not get this? But, ICE agents are Han Solo, and, Alex Pretty was Greedo or whatever. And
what?
Dude, people just dunked on this guy of like, no, let me explain to you. ICE agents are stormtroopers. Trump is Darth Vader. Putin is Palpatine. I mean, like giving him like a dissertation back.
Wow.
But I was like, you watched Star Wars and concluded that Han Solo is an ICE agent. Like, that's
amazing.
That was your
It's
takeaway
amazing.
from that?
It's like, do you not understand what the rebellion is all about?
Well, and I don't know if you saw a few weeks ago.
They're domestic terrorists, right? Luke
Yeah.
Skywalker and Han Solo,
Right.
they're domestic terrorists. That's
But, like,
and
Disney
for
came
the
out-
listener, air quotes here.
Disney came out and said like, hey, what's a Disney quote that summarizes how you feel right now? And people were like quoting Andor and like all these things, and like they had to remove the post because it became all of this is what I realized. All of our stories are about fighting this, and then in real life, everybody cowers from it.
Totally. Yeah. It's so true. But yeah, it's, we need that rebellious spirit. We need that Dumbledore's army spirit. We can't just sit by. I mean, that's why Minnesotans. I mean, they're such nice people, right? Minnesota nice is a thing, but like, I was telling a friend, I don't know if I can say this on your pod, but you know how like people, what is it? Is it New Hampshire? Like, don't tread on me. It's like in Minnesota, it's like, don't fuck with my neighbors. Like that's the vibe is like, people are so opposed to ICE because there's such a, like, we have to band together and love each other. Yeah. It's crazy, but like, that vibe is so strong here in Minnesota, and to say that this is domestic terrorism is like people with whistles who are just like concerned about people they love in their neighborhood. Like, again, this is the same thing. How can you watch Andor and think Han Solo is an ICE agent? It's like, how can you think that somebody's saying shame after Renee Good has just been shot and the ICE agent says fucking bitch, right? How can you say, oh, paid agitators are sitting around, provoking the situation? Like, I just get incredibly angry, and I'm sorry if you had to censor half of that, but it's just frustrating.
We let it air, John. We let it air. I saw someone else, the famous Nazi Germany quote where it's like, first they came for these guys, then they came for, and then there's no one left. That whole idea. I saw someone write another modern version of that. They're like, first they came for my neighbor, and I said, fuck off, leave my neighbor alone. And I was like, that's amazing. Like, just stops right there. Like, no, like we're not letting you do this.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Just so you know, and all of us listening that don't live in Minnesota, we're all cheering you guys on right now. And as ugly as the world is, watching the beauty of people stand up to empire, to stand up to fascism. I mean, it is like, it's the whole Mr. Rogers look for the helpers idea. Like, that is so inspiring to see the way people rally together around their community, around the vulnerable. It's like, that's the gospel.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. It is beautiful. Yeah.
Getting all emotional at the end of this episode. All right. What's the problem you're trying to solve?
What's the problem I'm trying to solve? I mean, there's little, intellectual problems that I'm always trying to solve. Little projects that I'm working on and thinking through. All very minor in the grand scheme of things, especially compared to what's happening right outside my windows. So they're not really problems when you contextualize it.
Yeah, we got a few big ones right now. What's something you're excited about?
I am excited about our new book that's coming out, Janine Brown and I, The Greatest Story Ever Retold, about Jesus films. But it's specifically, it's not just like, oh, let's talk about all these films. It's more like, every time you read, you visualize, you imagine, you cast the characters, you block the scene, you direct the line readings. You're like a director of a Jesus film, but it's one happening inside your head. So let's use Jesus films as an external reference point to talk about this internal process that happens every time you read. And then think about some of the tropes and the dynamics of filmmaking to talk about this hermeneutical concept, let's say, this hermeneutical dynamic of visualization that isn't talked about enough when we read the gospel. So I'm really excited about that book, and it'll be out in March.
Do you settle the old debate of do you watch the movie, read the book, and say, hey, the book was better?
I do think in the case of the Bible, the book was better. Always the book.
Can you
was
ever
better.
not say that?
Yeah. But and I am somebody who generally says the book was better. Harry Potter. I mean, you name it, right? The book was better. But this is the thing, right? The way that we're going about it is not so much like, oh, let's talk about, adaptation of books to screen. It's more like, wait, we're all adapting this material to create a little reel in our minds. And let's just think about that dynamic. And what's nice about Jesus films is we literally have hundreds of examples of this, right? Whereas like Harry Potter, right now we've got one example, and now HBO said they're going to make another. And so we can like compare 2 iterations of this.
Yeah.
But like with Jesus films, we have so many examples. And in fact, every time you hear someone preach, or in your case, right, when you get up and preach, how often have you said something like, I imagine it happened like this? You're basically saying, let me direct this film for you for a second.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And now everyone can visualize what you're trying to get them to visualize. And I think that dynamic is really interesting. And because we have so many different films from different cultures, etc., you can see how it's been visualized, envisioned, made visual in so many different ways. And sometimes it provokes you to think like, oh, wow, I've made a lot of assumptions about what's happening in this scene or that scene. And like, maybe I should think more critically about, well, why do I imagine it this way? I find it just immensely helpful and fascinating.
That's good. All right. Is there anything else, John, that we got to talk about? We can't close the episode out if we don't get this in, that we would be remiss. Anything you need to add to it before we wrap this up?
Oh, I think you have asked the perfect questions, all the best questions, and I think we have covered all the best grounds. And no, I don't know that I have anything else that needs to be addressed. I mean, I could, make a plug for our podcast, the Two Cities podcast, as well as the craft beer reception that I host for AAR and SBL every year. Just mentioning that everyone's invited who is a member of AAR, the American Academy of Religion, or SBL, Society of Biblical Literature. Every annual meeting, I host a craft beer event. It's an international bottle share. Bring your favorite beers, the rare beers, hard to find beers from wherever you live, or any home brews that you like to make, and bring them to the conference, and we'll share them on Monday night. So, and this year it's in Denver.
Nice. Okay, so if someone's resonating with all this, what's the easiest way for them to connect with your work online?
Well, the podcast. So we have a website and our different social media handles, and Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or X, and then my own personal accounts at Johnny Pepper 2, I think, on Facebook and Instagram, and then at Dr. J.A. Dunne on X. Yeah.
Excellent. I'll put all the links in the show notes, but I can imagine quite a few people are like, this guy's cool. I wanna connect with him later. Have a glass of something delicious.
Yes.
Well, hey, John, I appreciate your book. I appreciate that you spent 13 years on it and have dove to all the depths of what the scriptures say about alcohol. It is an incredible resource. I heartily recommend to anybody, if you're even remotely like curious, like what does the Bible actually say about this? The book gets into it, and far more than it'll answer questions you didn't even think of to ask, and that's a testament to the amount of thought you've put into it. But thanks for doing that. Thanks for being a voice in this space. There's not a ton of people bringing spirituality into this space, so when we find another partner, it's always like an instant friendship. So thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Cheers. And cheers to all of you listeners. Hopefully you got a lot out of this one, and we will see you on the next episode of Cabernet and Pray.